focus this evening. Wholesale inflation has crossed 15% in the month of April. It is at a record high. It is pinching pockets, impacting household budgets and eating into our monthly savings. It was 14.55% last month. The wholesale inflation rose to 15.08 owing to higher fuel and energy costs. The wholesale inflation has been in double digits for last 13 months. Remember, last week, retail inflation had also surged to an 8-year high of 7.79% in April. Let me tell you, much of the inflation spike is being seen as a result of the Russia-Ukraine conflict, with wholesale inflation remaining in double digits. There's a high chance that the RBI will hike the repo rate once again in June.
महंगाई बहुत ज़्यादा बढ़ गई है, जिस वजह से ना बहुत दिक्कतें आ रही है और सैलरी हमारी इतनी है नहीं। तो मैं मोदी सरकार से कहना चाहूँगा कि कम करे। पेट्रोल इतना महंगा होगा कि हमें बस से चलना पड़ रहा है यार। इतनी महंगी बाइक ले रखी है, उसमें पेट्रोल 105 रुपये लीटर हो रहा है और धूप में खड़ी कर दो वैसे ही आधा तो ऐसे ही उड़ जाता है। तो मैं कहूँगा कि महंगाई थोड़ी कम हो, पेट्रोल कम हो सबसे पहली बात। तो
महंगाई तो काफ़ी बढ़ी रही है क्योंकि पेट्रोल डीजल की दाम बढ़े, उसी से सारे लिंक्ड है। आरबीआई ने अभी मॉनेटरी पॉलिसी रिलीज़ की है, देखते हैं क्या होता है। बट सरकार के तरफ से भी कुछ मेजर्स लिए जाने चाहिए। पेट्रोल डीजल्स के दाम अगर कम किए जाए तो देन आई थिंक कि वो स्टेबलाइज होगा।
इसके पीछे बहुत सारे कारण हैं जिस वजह से महंगाई बढ़ रही है, और इसमें सबसे बड़ा तो भ्रष्टाचार का मुद्दा है कि अगर पीछे से कंपनी ने 1 रुपये किसी चीज़ पे रेट बढ़ाया है, मार्केट तक होलसेल मार्केट से लोकल मार्केट तक आते आते उसमें 1 की जगह 10 रुपये बढ़ा देते हैं कि पीछे से माल महंगा आ रहा है और माल स्टोर किया जा रहा है। और दूसरा ये है कि हम कोरोना के पीरियड से निकले हैं, बहुत लोग अनएम्प्लॉयड हुए हैं, बहुत ज़्यादा स्ट्रगल बढ़ गया है, इस चक्कर में महंगाई और बढ़ी है। दूसरा सबसे बड़ा फैक्टर जो है हिंदुस्तान के अंदर महंगाई बढ़ने का, पेट्रोलियम प्रोडक्ट्स हैं। अब पेट्रोलियम बढ़ेगा, ट्रांसपोर्टेशन बढ़ेगी, उसकी कॉस्ट बढ़ेगी, इस वजह से भी महंगाई बढ़ रही है।
नीचे वाली जो हमारी पॉपुलेशन है, गरीब तबका, उस पर बहुत ज़्यादा ये भारी पड़ रहा है। और अगर पेट्रोलियम प्रोडक्ट बढ़ रहे हैं तो उसकी मार हर एक डिवीज़न को जाती है कि पेट्रोलियम बढ़ने से फल सब्जी खाना और सब पे एकदम बहुत ज़्यादा फर्क पड़ता है। और इसको पहले आप इन्हीं चीज़ों को लेकर हमारी जो प्रेजेंट गवर्नमेंट है अपोजिशन से क्वेश्चन पूछा करती थी, एलपीजी सिलेंडर्स और कि भाई 1000 रुपये कैसे हो गया। पहले आपने सब्सिडी ख़त्म कर दी, पहले आप सब्सिडी लाए के हम डायरेक्ट बैंक में डालेंगे, फिर आपने ख़त्म कर दी डबल। आपने एलपीजी सिलेंडर्स फ्री में बंटवाए स्टार्टिंग में गरीब तबके के लिए, क्या वो भरवा पाएंगे 1000 रुपये का सिलेंडर?
All right, for more on this, I'm joined by my colleague Hina Gambhir on the broadcast. Hina, thank you for joining us. Wholesale inflation is in double digits, and this translates into double whammy for us. Because last week when the retail inflation data came, it was again at a record high, and today wholesale inflation also spells doom for small businesses, for the middle class, for investors, and everybody in this country. For the benefit of our viewers, could you help us decode the numbers? Which are the sectors which are witnessing wholesale inflation the most, and what are the reasons?
Well, what we are seeing today is a cause of concern. We're talking about wholesale inflation. Now, in simple terms, it means how the inflation level has been in the wholesale market. And you're right when you say it tells us the impact of the rise in global commodity prices on small businesses. So for producers, the inflation level, it has been in double digits for 13th month in a row. In the month of April, it has crossed 15% mark. So it's at a record high. Now, for us, it's a cause of concern because this is leading to everything that we buy for our daily use getting expensive, be it about the essential commodities that we use on a daily basis. Our ability to pay loan is getting tough, to repay loan because our EMIs are going up because of inflation rising. Apart from this, the groceries that we buy on a daily basis are also getting expensive. Fruits and vegetables are already high, be it the auto fuel, the fuel that we used in our vehicles, cars, two-wheelers, etc., or the cooking fuel, the cooking gas that's used in the homes, even that is quite expensive. Apart from this, people who were looking to travel abroad in this season is also going to get expensive. So this, in a nutshell, is the impact of this rise in inflation that we are seeing in the country. You're right, it's been a double whammy because retail inflation was quite high. It was the highest since May 2014, and today the wholesale inflation has also come in at a record high. You also asked me about the reasons behind. So actually there are four reasons that are responsible for this बढ़ती महंगाई for each one of us. One is the ongoing Russia-Ukraine crisis. That is leading to surge in global food prices. Global commodity prices are also quite high, which is having an impact on prices in our country of essential commodities. Then rise in crude oil prices in the global market, having a direct impact on our fuel prices. Even though petrol and diesel prices in the country are on hold for quite some time, but in the days to come, they are also likely to go up. And lastly, the heat wave that we are seeing in the country, in some parts of North India and the central part of the country, is also the reason why the inflation level is rising. We'll have to now wait and see what the government will do to help us, get some sort of relief.
All right. Thank you so much, Hina, for dissecting this entire phenomenon of wholesale inflation and the numbers and what they really mean for you and me. I'm also joined by Dr. Aman Agarwal, who's Professor of Finance, Dean and Director, Indian Institute of Finance. So thank you for making time and speaking to Mirror Now. Mr. Agarwal, how do you view this? These numbers are, of course, bad news for us. It's after the retail inflation data, now wholesale inflation has also surged to a level which is a record high. How do you view these numbers?
You see, till about 2010-11 or so, we typically looked at the wholesale price index only in India. So we always used to keep a tab and track of what was the wholesale price index, and we used to have a similar range of 5 to 5.5 or 6% for the wholesale price index, as I said, till 2010-11, after which we moved to the CPI-based framework, and since then we have been tracking more the CPI framework than the wholesale price index, which has been traditionally tracked and is being still calibrated by these statistical agencies in terms of numbers. Now, when it comes to the wholesale price index, as some of the viewers who you interviewed, you presented, have rightly pointed out, there have been disruptions in terms of supplies because of specifically transportation costs and petrol prices going up steepingly high, which is making it unviable for a large number of producers of these commodities to bring them to market and then sell it at a price which they are getting from some of these wholesale price indexes. And that's where the difference is coming. And lately, we look at more retail prices because large part of retail segment is interplayed in large cities in this country. And hence a result that the wholesale price index, although has a substantial importance, but is still not a key factor when we look at the inflation in terms, because lately for last almost a decade now, we are looking at CPI. In terms of CPI, certainly it has gone up, but it is not still outside the range. We're still fairly at the brim of a catastrophe which can happen if it is not brought under control. But still we are fairly under control, given when we look at not only the Indian markets, but when we specifically look at markets across the globe and the way inflation in countries which has been about 0.5%, 0.5 basis points or 0.25 basis points or 1% maximum, 1.25%, having an inflation of about 8.5%, 9%, 10%, 12%. Given that in India, the inflation, overall inflation, which is a CPI-based inflation, is fairly under control, and the RBI is trying to keep a tab. And that's why the sudden MPC meeting was called upon about a week, 10 days back. And there was an increase which was announced of about 40 basis points as a matter of fact, just to try to tame the inflation. However, there are reasons which are different as against different parts of the world. You see, when we look at Japan, United States, or Europe as a whole, there the inflation is being as a rebounding factor of the fiscal spending, which most of these nations have done. As a result, a lot of money supply is there in the market, and the goods are few because of supply chain disruptions on these countries. However, the case in India is not the same. India, largely this inflation is an oil push inflation, where it is because of the oil prices rising too high, there's an inflation which is getting created both in the real terms and also notional and hypothetical terms created by people and vendors who are actually hiking their prices much beyond the prices which is normally supposed to be high. And that's where the monetary policy measures of increasing the repo rate or taking bank measures in terms of trying to curb money supply in the market will not majorly bring about a major difference in the inflation factor, but the government will have to come out with various tools in terms of reducing the oil prices, which is very much within the hands of the government. But now, one thing which is very important to be understood is that everyone is now talking about Ukraine-Russia war. To the best of my analysis and my data studying, which I've been doing for a couple of months now, the impact of Ukraine and Russia war so much so in India is not that high, specifically for two reasons. One is that in terms of import-exports, only 0.5% of the total trade is there with Ukraine, which is about $1.98 billion. Even if that trade finishes off today, there is not going to be a major impact or dent on the economy. Secondly, with Russia, this trade is still going on, majorly of oil, defense, and some pharmaceuticals and some other equipment. Now, there the trade has not fallen off, and even the oil which we are buying more now is at a discounted price as against the market-driven price. So the Ukraine-Russia war per se doesn't have direct impact on India. It is only a psychological framework which is creating hypothetical situations for people to go about raising prices, and some governments saying. So as far as the supply chain disruptions are concerned, when we look at agriculture commodities, which is the wholesale price major factor commodity, here the agriculture which is produced largely comes from within the country. In fact, we are a stock buffer provider of large number of agriculture producers to the rest of the world, as has been made by some ministers also. So it is not that we are actually inflating or inducing inflation or other problems from the rest of the world, specifically because of Ukraine-Russia war. So that factor in real terms is not a factor in terms, but the oil is certainly a major factor.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Aman Agarwal, for making time and speaking to Mirror Now and helping us understand the nuances of this very important story that we are tracking on Mirror Now.